Order. We now come to new clause 2, with which it will be convenient to also debate new clause 3. I call the Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. The Honourable Member for St Neots and Mid Cambridge had clearly precisely the same thought that we have had, and indeed as many other educators, peers and businesses have had as well, namely that we should make the bill actually do what the government tries to pretend it does and actually set up Skills England. And as I said in the last session of this committee, the bill as introduced did not even mention Skills England, and the reason it didn't need to mention Skills England is that it is part of the DFE. In fact, the CEO is a pair of DFE civil servants. Now, ministers have made their case for this insourcing. They think it would make things faster, and we have made our case for independence, but so have lots of others. For example, as the Labour peer, Baroness Blower, pointed out, the appropriate move from where we are would be to a statutory body, and that is the effect of our new clause 2. The powers that would be transferred to the Secretary of State would instead be vested into Skills England. And as the Labour peer, Lord Knight, has pointed out, the problem that some of us have with this bill is it feels like the second half is missing. The second half is the establishment of Skills England as a statutory body, and that is effectively our new clause 3. Now, in the previous session, I quoted from various industry bodies making the case for independence, including the Institute for the Motor Industry and the Construction Industry Training Board. Since then, further evidence has been submitted to this committee from those on the education side. The University of Winchester, in their submission to this committee, highlight what they call 4 core concerns. One of them is about independence. They say, and I quote, "The transfer of power from IFET to the Secretary of State for Education raises questions about the independence of the proposed Skills England regulatory body. We believe that the integration within the Department for Education is a significant risk, with the current regulatory body being completely independent of external leverage. The current IFET structure includes a regulatory board which is independent from the DFE, ensuring that outside influence is minimised within the decision-making process. We are therefore recommending that Skills England is structured to ensure and protect their regulatory independence from government and other agencies," and that is the spirit of our new clauses here. University of Winchester also worry that at present in IFET, employers and academics come together to ensure that the standard is industry relevant, current and academically rigorous. Within the current proposed bill, we believe this breadth will be at risk, given the transfer of power from IFET to an individual in the Secretary of State for Education. This transfer has the potential to lead to situations where ministers can create and or change standards and assessment plans without consultation with the relevant stakeholders, resulting in apprenticeships which are not fit for purpose or academically appropriate. And they also note that currently IFET as a regulatory body highlights the importance of technical education, both through its name and its work. The proposed legislation will effectively remove the prominence of this important aspect of industry, undermining its activities and relegating it to the background. And they are completely right. Setting up an institute was a core part of the drive to create greater prestige and esteem for technical education, and our amendments here aim to restore that degree of independence from the Secretary of State. NC 3C and E1 also try to highlight via an annual report how the Secretary of State is steering Skills England and how the body is responding to that. I mentioned earlier the submission to this committee from the Skills Foundation, which brings together 18 employer-led skills bodies and 150,000 employers, and their submission notes the clauses in the bill which transfer powers from IFET to the Secretary of State risk shifting the development of standards further away from employer demand, and that too much centralisation leads to a lack of focus on sector needs. That is surely right, and that is why we propose a degree of decentralisation with these new clauses. Now, in a previous session, the Minister made the argument that the Secretary of State might need to directly write standards without external input from a group of people in fast-moving and technology sectors. And we argued, in contrast, that these are precisely the kind of exciting sectors where industry input, rather than just ministerial enthusiasm, is most needed. And the same argument that we made is made to this committee by ISC2, the International Professional Body for Cybersecurity, and they write to this committee, while ISC2 understands that the government is seeking to introduce flexibility and agility in the way apprenticeship standards are developed, we contend that without industry involvement in the development of standards, there is a risk that apprenticeships may not adequately reflect the evolving needs of certain sectors. This is especially true for cybersecurity, where a changing threat landscape and dramatic shifts brought about by emerging technologies means that apprenticeship standards must stay relevant. It is essential that the voice of professionals in industry, as well as those directly involved in delivering educational provision, be heard whenever the Secretary of State exercises these new powers. Any decision to intervene and directly develop or approve apprenticeship standards or assessment plans should take into account the perspective of those with hands-on expertise in the sector. They are surely right, Madam Chairman. We've already voted on a very similar set of new clauses to this, where we voted on new clause 1 from the member before St Neots and Cambridgeshire. So we won't put this to the vote. But I do want to log the concerns that are being raised by professionals and those in industry about the lack of independence. I do hope that, even though I suspect that they are not going to change their mind about bringing this into the department, that they can at least find ways in its operating procedures and the way it evolves to try and create that sense of independence and to try and reassure all of those who are very worried about the idea of the Secretary of State taking the powers in this bill to go it alone and write things without the input of those who are actually working in the sector.
Creation of Skills England.
The question is that new clause 2 be read a second time. Damien Hines.
Thank you very much, Ms Benson. I rise to speak in favour of the new clauses in the name of my honourable friend, the Shadow Minister. And he's right, of course, we've just voted on something quite similar. The vote obviously was lost by the classic 11-4 margin, with which we've become familiar. But that doesn't mean the government can't do it. And indeed, there have been some signs, some indications that the government might make Skills England a fully independent body on a statutory footing. The bill as introduced, of course, although most people in their speeches talk about skills, and that's not what the bill does. The bill abolishes something without actually creating something else, and it hands the powers to the Secretary of State, and it's in the Secretary of State's gift where then to hand them on to. There was also the question that came up last Thursday about Ofqual and what the bill does to Ofqual, which I don't think we were 100% clear about. I think the Minister was going to write. Now, I don't think I've seen that letter. That's not to say it hasn't come or hasn't been sent, but I'm just wondering if, when she comes to speak, if she could just confirm if that letter has come. There have always been two fundamental questions about this bill and about the creation of Skills England. The first is about independence, and the second is about who should set the expectations, the standards for various occupations. Should it be the employers in those organisations or somebody else? There's a third thing, I think, as well, which is very relevant to independence, and that is about the heft of this body and putting skills right at the heart of cross-departmental work and what independence, statutory independence does to the status, would do to the status of this body. Of course, particularly in education and training, one of the reasons that we have independent bodies is so that everybody knows that the standards are robust and they cannot be subject to political pressure. There can't be a temptation to make it a bit easier to get over a hurdle in order to make the numbers look better. And we've had that system of independence for a very long time. And to this day, of course, do and still will in the future for academic qualifications. And so, as I said the other day, I think independence of this body actually is really important to underpinning parity of esteem. IFATE is legally established as a non-departmental public body, whereas Skills England will be, as things stand, an executive agency. And as a non-departmental public body, IFATE does therefore have some independence from DFE because its functions and responsibilities are set out in legislation approved by this Parliament, whereas Skills England, again as things stand, will simply be an integral part, a unit within DFE. Now, going back to when Skills England was first talked about, and in the King's speech, it did seem that it was going to be established as an independent body. And so, as well as the question I just had about Ofqual, my other two questions to the Minister are, first of all, what's changed? Why, if that was the intent, and maybe we all just misread the text, but if that was the intent, why, what's different now that it shouldn't be? And finally, if it's right for the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council to be put on a statutory footing, Why is it not for Skills England?
Minister to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Turning first to new clause 2, this would impose a requirement on the Secretary of State to establish Skills England as a statutory body with a separate legal identity. It will then transfer the functions the Secretary of State takes on in this bill to a new body within 12 months. This amendment would undo significant progress this government has already made to establish Skills England. Skills England has been operating in shadow form since July of last year. It is ready to take on the functions conferred by this bill. I want to reassure members that we considered different options for the model of arm's length body that Skills England should take. Being an executive agency allows us to move fast, much faster than the last government did of 14 years. Skills England can take immediate action to plug the skills gaps that this government has inherited, and we are focused on economic growth. An executive agency balances the independent Skills England's need to deliver its functions at arm's length from the body and from the department, and being close enough to inform decisions on skills policy and delivery. This is good practice for all new arm's length bodies. The Department for Education will undertake a review of Skills England. The review will take place around 18 to 24 months after it is fully established and will align with the requirements of any future Cabinet Office review programme. It will consider how far Skills England is delivering its functions in the way intended, whether its mix of functions is still aligned to government priorities, whether there are alternative ways to deliver the government's objectives, including a different model of arm's length body. Delay, however, is not an option. We need to respond urgently to critical issues in the skills system to drive growth and spread opportunity. And to encourage this committee, the first set of apprenticeship statistics under the new Labour government, we saw an increase in starts, participation and achievements compared to the same period under the Tories in 2023. We remain an ambitious Labour government. We do not dither or delay, and we urgently need reform to deliver the skills and technical education that is needed. This is what the bill and Skills England will enable us to do. I turn now to new clause 3, which would create a duty on the Secretary of State to publish an annual report setting out Skills England's activities in the preceding year. It would also require Skills England to have regard to matters such as the quality of training and education and value for money when performing its duties. There are well-established requirements already placed on the executive agency, so there is a high level of transparency and accountability for how they operate. This also includes the publication of the framework document, which, as I've already mentioned it, is a core constitutional document. This will be agreed between the Department of Education and Skills England in accordance with HM Treasury's handbook managing public money. Once finalised, it will be published online and a copy will be deposited in both houses. The Secretary of State and Skills England, acting on their behalf, is already obliged under general public law to take into account all relevant matters when exercising their functions. These relevant matters are likely to include the ones in this amendment. While the bill has been scrutinised in the other place, my right honourable friend, as I've already said, my honourable friend, the Baroness Smith of Malvern, shared a draft copy of Skills England framework document with peers. She is committed to include references to the need for Skills England to deliver its functions efficiently and effectively and ensure that training is high quality and provides good value for money. With regards to the honourable member for East Hampshire and regarding response on Ofcom, the letter addressing Ofcom has been sent to the chair of the committee and is also addressing other issues raised by the other member last Thursday. Now, I'm happy to repeat the commitments I've already mentioned here. But finally, I'd like to say there is precedent for non-departmental public bodies being closed and their functions being reassigned to newly formed executive bodies. For example, under the previous government in 2011, the Standards and Testing Agency was established as an executive agency, taking on functions from the Qualifications and Curriculum Development Agency, a non-departmental public body which was then later closed.
Shadow Minister to respond.
Not moved.
Thank you. So is everyone content for the clause to be withdrawn?
Aye.
New clause by leave withdrawn. Next one. We now come to new clause 4, with which it will be convenient to also debate new clause 5. I call on the Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This new clause requires a report on the impact of the bill on T-levels. Now, we talked before about the measure in clause 8 to bring Ofqual into the regulation of technical qualifications and the implication that that is focused on T-levels. I was going to say that anyway, but let me just pause for a moment on this point about clause 8 and Ofqual. I have not seen from the clerks to this committee the letter that the Minister just referred to. I don't know whether you are able to guide us, Madam Chairman, about whether that letter has been made available to members. I may simply have missed it, but I don't know if it has been circulated to members of this committee.
We don't think we've seen the letter yet.
So the Minister says that the letter has been sent to the Chairman, but the Chairman says that she has not seen the letter. Perhaps the Minister can undertake to...
Yeah, absolutely. Just to say that the letter addressing the issues the Honourable Member has made and the fellow Honourable Member has been sent to the Chair of the committee. And I'm sure when the previous Chair of the other Chair of the committee, I'm sure Sir Christopher, I'm sure that will be shared in due course.
Madam Chairman, it's a shame, obviously, this is the last day of our consideration in committee of this bill, so I don't know whether the letter could be produced before we finish today, but otherwise, effectively, those questions will go unanswered because they haven't made their way to the members of this committee. But anyway, this was a minor point about the interaction here with clause 8 and the decision to bring Ofqual in potentially for T-levels. Let me turn on to T-levels squarely now. I was very encouraged about the positive words about T-levels in the curriculum review. But it's very, very difficult to get a new qualification going, never mind a whole new system, which is what T-levels were intended to be in their initiation by Lord Sainsbury. Now, after the big, long debate on BTECs, ministers in the end decided to add T-levels into the existing alphabet soup of qualifications, rather than to use them to replace and rationalise that system, which was the original goal of Lord Sainsbury's project. And I should declare an interest insofar as I worked on T-levels back when they were still known as the, quote, Sainsbury routes. Nonetheless, it would still, despite this decision, be possible for them to grow and become a leading part of the system, but that would require a huge push from ministers. It's very difficult to get a new qualification going, never mind a whole new system. And it is much more likely that in the absence of a big push from ministers, that they will stagnate as an interesting and well-regarded and quality niche, but ultimately a small part of the system, which was really not what was intended. For several years, the DFE has provided a 10% uplift to the funding rates for T-levels as a new qualification. But a couple of weeks ago, the government implied that it would stop doing that this year. They haven't made a decision, and providers are now desperate for certainty on this issue. So I asked the Minister directly, and I ask that she responds to this. Will the 10% uplift be continued or not after this academic year? The sector are now making decisions about this. They urgently need certainty. The Minister keeps saying that she wants to, quote, move fast. The providers are asking her to move fast and to give them the certainty on what the funding rate will be and whether the 10% will continue. Because if not, my strong sense is that many providers will conclude that it's not really a priority anymore, and they will conclude that it is not worth the investment of time and resources, which is significant to get these things going. So I hope that the Minister can address this point, and I give her a bit of notice. Will the 10% continue or not? It's a yes or no. The government is notionally in a one-year, quotes, pause on move to replace BTECs, which should give the government at least time to make up its mind on how it sees the future of T-levels. But if they want to preserve the option for ambition on T-levels, they need to keep supporting them now. Those of us who worked on them and their developments and to those of us who still support them, we are not at all blind to the challenges of them. Although dropout rates fell very sharply in the last year, they are still high. And even though T-levels are meant to be hard, they are meant to be a demanding qualification, we want more people to get to the end of them. And although the huge work experience is a key advantage and key attraction also of T-levels to learners, that is expensive and it's hard to deliver. And it's particularly hard to deliver in a way that is slick and gives clarity to students up front rather than stress. And I don't say this every day, Madam Chairman, but I think Gordon Brown was right to press the government to be more ambitious here. Not often not always that we cheer Gordon Brown on these benches, but on this occasion he is absolutely right. And Lord Sainsbury is right too, to want to be ambitious. A huge amount of thought went into T-levels over a very long period on a cross-party basis. And they have great potential to really rationalise the system and to do what politicians for decades have said they wanted to do, which is create a really prestigious and clear alternative to the academic route and the A-level route. But at the moment, T-levels are still a fledgling qualification. They have great potential, but they are in need of a lot of care and attention right now. But my worry is that amidst all the commotion and disruption caused by the transfer of IFATE staff into the department, that attention will be lost at the critical moment in their development. The looming withdrawal of 10% compounds my worries that attention is going to be lost just at this critical moment. So our amendment aims to ensure that the spotlight stays on T-levels, that they don't get lost in all the reorganisation, and we preserve at least the option for these to become the really widespread leading qualification on the technical side, and that we really do achieve the vision that Lord Sainsbury had of a more prestigious, higher funded set of qualifications with simpler routes, more intelligible for employers, with much more work experience and a higher rate of funding too. There is such potential in T-levels. It would be a tragedy if they got lost in all this reorganisation, and that is why we put down this amendment today, to ensure that we continue to monitor everything that's going on with them very, very closely.
Reports on the impact of T-levels?
I noticed that NC5 is also to be related with NC4 in the grouping, and if you'll forgive me, Madam Chairman, I had not noticed that they had been grouped together, and I do want to talk to NC5 as well. But I don't know whether it should be appropriate to do that now or to let the Minister. No. I'm extremely grateful, Madam Chairman. So let me turn on to NC5, which is higher education. Now, the government talks about Skills England bringing everything together, but of course, as my honourable friend from East Hampshire has pointed out, you can never quite do that. There are always other bodies and always overlaps. Now, in this case, there will be, for starters, two continuing levy training bodies, the CITB and the EITB, and of course, lots of other bodies that my honourable friend mentioned, thinking about skills and supply, including the Migration Advisory Committee, the workforce strategies of other departments, like the NHS Long-Term Workforce Plan, which spans technical education, higher education, and apprenticeships. And the other big case in point, of course, is the work, the overlap between the work of IFATE and in Future Skills England and the regulators of higher education. And we talked in the last session about the very welcome growth of higher apprenticeships and the government's imminent plans to axe them, which we are very concerned about, particularly after so much work has gone into them. And that is why the amendment that we have today, NC5, requires a report of the impact of this Act on higher education. This bill is about apprenticeships and technical education rather than higher, but the two have become increasingly overlapping. The number of people on higher apprenticeships went up from just over 3,000 in 2010 to 273,000 last year, a huge increase. And for some universities, their role in providing degree apprenticeships has become a very, very important part of their work. I'm not going to recapitulate the things I talked about in the last session. Level 7 apprenticeships are a very powerful tool to enable people to earn while they learn and allow employers the freedom to shape higher education to their needs. Employers are they're choosing with their own money to invest in level 7 skills, and it would be false to assume that a reduction in funding here would lead to an increase in lower levels. And contrary to the claims that sometimes made, level 7 apprenticeships do not cater primarily to major corporations. Less than 10% of level 7 apprentices are in FTSE 350 companies. And level 7 apprenticeships in health and care are a hugely important part of the NHS workforce pipeline. And in the last session I talked about the 11,000 gap in senior nursing that acting them would blow in the NHS plan over the long term. But that hole would start right now, as there were 2,040 starts on health, public services and care level 7 apprenticeships in 2023-24. Now the creation of the apprenticeship levy had two purposes. On the one hand, to stop employers who do the right thing and invest in their people from being exploited by employers who don't and just wait to poach their staff instead once they're trained. And on the other hand, it was to make sure that employers really drove and owned the system. And now that they do drive and own the system, we see that their revealed preference is to spend their money on higher and degree apprenticeships. And the growth has been spectacular. Between 2018-19 and 23-24, higher and degree apprenticeship starts grew by 63%. Level 7 apprenticeship starts, even higher up, grew by 105%. And it was even faster in some critical sectors. Level 7 apprenticeships in health, public services and care grew 716%. And very significant extensions also occurred in construction, planning and in built environment, where they went up by more than 700%, and in digital technology, where they went up nearly 600%, both of which are key skills area for our economy, and both of which are supposed to be a key part of the government's industrial strategy. Now, this bill changes the balance between the voices of employers and the voices of ministers. Degree and level 7 apprenticeships are actually a really good example of how ministerial priorities can be very different from employer priorities. I won't repeat the criticisms that I read out from lots of employers in our last session. I quoted the Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Chartered Institute of Management, several firms of solicitors, as well as those providing higher apprenticeships into local government and the NHS. But now I want, in this session, to look at the other side of the ledger and the impact on universities, which is the purpose of this new clause. Now, I've said before that we would never accept the lack of independence that is proposed here for technical education if it were on the academic side. We would not have ministers setting the curriculum, the specification, and then the exams for GCSE, and then taking on the role of off-qual and marking their own homework. We would not allow the same for higher education either, in general, but there is a growing overlap between IFATE, which is to be centralised into the DFE, and higher education, and that raises all kinds of implications. Now, the context for higher education is a challenging one. The government has increased fees, but then wiped out the gains from this by increasing national insurance, meaning a real terms cut in resources for universities this year. And with widespread industrial action in the sector looming, the government has also chosen this moment to dramatically lower this threshold for strike action in the Employment Rights Bill. So to now axe level 7 and potentially also level 6 apprenticeships will be very destabilising for universities, and it will potentially whack those institutions that have tried to do the right thing, try to do the right thing for their community and the right thing for those who don't traditionally go to university. 66 universities now deliver level 7 apprenticeship standards, and some have got really into this. For a very prestigious institution like Cranfield, which is a postgrad only institution with very deep industry links, they are hugely exposed if the government really does wield the axe in the way that they are planning to. And I suspect that level 7 would account for a very, very large part of their UK students. Likewise, York St John University have something in the order of 100 level 7 apprenticeships. Other institutions that are heavily involved include the Open University, Manchester Metropolitan, and the University of West London. And given the challenging context for higher education, partly as a result of ministers' own decisions, now axing these things, which have become quite a big part of their work, can be very, very damaging. So, Madam Chairman, given that their action on fees, national insurance and strike action has been a connoisseur-level example of unjoined-up government, I am not really reassured that ministers will have thought through the implications of axing level 7 for higher education. Can the Minister... I'm very happy to give way.
On that point, thank you for giving way. It's my understanding that the bill, as unamended, doesn't preclude the continuation of levels 6 and 7 degree apprenticeships. And I speak as somebody who worked in the higher education sector before coming here and see the value of them. But it's my understanding that there's nothing in the bill that rules them out at this point.
The Honourable Lady is completely correct. No, the bill. This is not the bill that is abolishing level 7 apprenticeships. The government is planning to abolish most level 7 apprenticeships, according to ministers, which I think is a shame. And I thought, a note of regret in the Honourable Lady's comments there, which I certainly share. But no, my point is this. We are acting for, in this clause, a view of the impacts of this bill and the actions of ministers through their centralisation of power on higher education, because of course there is now this overlap. You might think, hey, we're looking at a bill on technical education and apprenticeships, what's that got to do with universities? But the truth is that it now has quite a lot to do with universities for the reasons that I have just set out. And I worry that the implications of this have not been well thought through. So, can the Minister give us the assurance that she really has thought this through? Can she tell us, for example, how much income would universities lose if the Level 7 levy funding really is axed, as ministers plan to? How much would universities lose if Level 6 levy funding is also axed, as ministers are keeping options open to do? I would love answers from the Minister on these questions today. If she doesn't feel able to give them, then I'd be very happy if she is happy to write to me. But this is why we bring this amendment, so that we have transparency, and we have it also in the back of ministers' minds that as they take control, greater control, of everything to do with technical education and apprenticeships, they're not just thinking about those things in their own right, although they are very important.
Could my honourable friend allow me?
Absolutely.
I wonder if my honourable friend, in his encouragement to the Minister to write to him about the effect of the Level 6 and Level 7 restrictions, might also ask her if she might comment on the effect, the potential effect of those potential restrictions also on schools, so on the sector that DFE itself is responsible for, and particularly around the postgraduate teaching apprenticeship and what the effect may be.
Yeah, and my right honourable friend is completely correct, and he will remember from the last session that I tried to lay out the incredibly damaging effect, direct effect on our public services that the decision to axe Level 7 apprenticeships would have, most notably in the NHS, where the doctor's apprenticeship has already been axed, which is tragic and has left various people who are on it stranded, particularly for advanced nursing, a critical part of the NHS's long-term workforce plan, for management throughout the public services, particularly for local government and the town planning skills that the government claims are desperately needed. So the implications, exactly as my right honourable friend says, are severe right across the public services, including in teaching, where the DFE is the biggest user of this and the biggest beneficiary in the end, which is a terrible, terrible irony. Anyway, this is why we bring this amendment, so that we have at least transparency about the effects of ministers' actions, and we have it in the back of ministers' minds that they are going to have to explain their decisions, not just the direct effect of what they do to technical and apprenticeship funding, but also its effects on the wider education sector as well.
Can I just say at this stage we have located the missing letter, which you should all have now on your desk, and I will suspend for 5 minutes while we try and digest it, and if you want to come back with something, Shadow Minister or anyone, feel free. 5 minutes. An unusual situation, I'm told by the clerks. I have to sort of say at the moment, this letter refers to clauses that have previously been debated, so I'll not be allowing a debate on this. That is for your information, which you could use if you choose at report stage to raise again. I don't want you not to have that opportunity to, you know, probe further. Right, the Minister to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. Turning, first of all, I want to thank the Honourable Member for his contributions to new clause 4 and 5 and for tabling them. Turning first to new clause 4, which would impose a duty on the Secretary of State to publish a report within 1 year of raw asset, setting out the impact of the Act on T-levels. Specifically, the report must include information on the administration and accreditation of T-levels, whether T-levels are meeting local demand for schools. T-levels are indeed an excellent technical qualifications for students after GCSEs, and I concur with the Honourable Member. Thousands of T-level students have already gone on to jobs, apprenticeships and further study related to the subject of T-levels. With regard to the Honourable Member's question, will the 10% uplift be continued or not after this academic year? We will confirm the position in due course, and I will write to the member on this point. Now, thousands of T-level students, as I've said, have already gone on to jobs, apprenticeships and further study related to the subject of their T-level. And we continue to support their growth and uptake. Indeed, 3 new T-levels were launched in September 2024. A new T-level in marketing will be available from September, and we'll continue to support providers to deliver and upscale their T-level offer. T-levels are designed by employers based on occupational standards, and Skills England will continue the work IFATE has been doing to set and maintain the high quality occupational standards on which T-levels are built. Curriculum content and assessment methods are set by awarding organisations in line with these standards. Now, the bill already contained a duty for the Secretary of State to publish a report setting out which of the functions being transferred are to be undertaken by Skills England and the impact that this has had on technical education and apprenticeships. This report will of course inform information on T-levels, given that they are an important form of technical education qualification. Ofqual is an independent regulator for technical qualifications and is the only body with the power to accredit qualifications. Through this bill, we are reintroducing the potential for Ofqual to apply its accreditation power to technical qualifications where the Secretary of State considers it to be appropriate. This will reopen the door for the full range of regulatory options being available for technical education qualifications. This will help to ensure their quality and enhance confidence in them. We continue.
Fortuitously, we do have an opportunity to ask about something that was in the letter, which the Minister is going through now. And first of all, thank you for the letter. I am struggling a bit with this thing about if the Secretary of State deems it appropriate. Not because I question that judgment, but just because I don't really understand what the intent is. So what does she believe will be the practical change that comes about as a result? Is it, for example, about more new qualifications coming in, a change in the balance between T-levels and other TVET qualifications, or what?
I thank you, Honourable Member, for his question. My understanding is that for certain technical qualifications, there needs to be the option for Ofqual to decide whether to inspect them and whether it should be accredited. And that option needs to be available. At present, it hasn't been happening since 2002. We continue to support the growth and uptake of T-levels in line identifying skill needs in the economy. Skills England will gather and publish information about local skill needs. Skills England will also assess how far available provision, including T-levels, is meeting those needs. I now turn to New Clause 5. New Clause 5 will impose a duty on the Secretary of State to publish within 1 year of roll set a report on the impact of the Act on the higher education sector in England. Higher education providers play an essential role in understanding and meeting the nation's skill needs and supporting the growth mission. Many of the jobs and sectors that will drive economic growth rely on the skills delivered by high educational providers, It is therefore vital that Skills England works closely with and supports the higher education sector as it delivers each of its three key functions. Higher education providers have a deep understanding of local skill needs and growth opportunities. This provides a rich resource for Skills England to draw on, and it builds its authoritative assessments of skills needs in the economy.
Hugely encouraged by the Minister's recognition of the importance of these higher degree level apprenticeships to the higher education sector now. I wonder, would she undertake to write setting out what the impact would be of ending level 7 apprenticeships on universities? I mean primarily the financial impact, but also the impact in terms of the numbers of students studying these things in higher education. Actually, the information that's available in the public domain is somewhat patchy, so it would be incredibly helpful to have this, either at the point that the government makes a decision on level 7 apprenticeships, or even better before. But I wonder if the Minister would undertake to write to me on this point to set out, so we are at least clear all on the same page about what the impact on universities would be of changes to level 7.
I think the Honourable Member is well aware, because he seems to have asked me this question many times, or similar questions of this sort, that more information will be coming out, that the government will be presenting. But staying on the issue of level 7 apprenticeships, we're reforming apprenticeships, tilting the system towards young people in most need of developing skills and getting a foot on the career ladder. We're cutting through the red tape by removing 12-month requirements to support shorter duration apprenticeships in key sectors. This flexibility will support apprentices in areas like creative industries where training does not need to take 12 months, currently putting barriers in the way of getting apprentices into key jobs. The Prime Minister also announced the development of new foundation apprenticeships, which will align to entry-level roles in key sectors, helping to bridge the gap between employers and skills and staffing shortages in young people ready to begin their careers. Now, returning to higher education providers are an integral part of local and regional skill systems, working closely with mayoral strategic authorities, employer representatives, bodies and others. And so there will be important partners for Skills England as it works to ensure that regional skills needs are met and that national skills priorities are supported up and down the country. As I've already made clear, there are already plans in place to report on the work of Skills England. The report that the Secretary of State will be required to publish after 6 months will already cover higher education. This is because the report will be required to cover the execution of functions by Skills England that relate to level 4 to 7, technical education, apprenticeship delivery in higher educational settings. Where relevant, the role of higher education in relation to Skills England's functions will also form part of Skills England's annual and other regular reporting on skill needs in the economy. Skills England's published analysis and insights on skills needs in our economy will also include a focus on how far provision is meeting higher level skill needs. This will help to inform decisions on higher education policy and delivery. A separate one-off report on Skills England's impact on higher education will therefore be a duplication. It would only repeat existing reporting arrangements and is therefore not required. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. I was a bit disappointed that the Minister wouldn't undertake to write or to set out the financial impact of ending level 7 apprenticeships on universities. When I speak to people in higher education, they're extremely worried about this, and for some institutions it will be a really damaging blow. And as numerous people, including those I already quoted during these debates, have pointed out, the government's hope is that all this money will flow straight from level 7 to level 2 and 3 apprenticeships. This is very unlikely to happen. It's more likely that it will flow to level 6. And it's clear from the Minister's comments that they're keeping that in the crosshairs too, and that they will be potentially also axing that at some point, which will further compound the damage in higher education and indeed to our skill system more broadly. So I was disappointed that the government doesn't want to set out that detail, but I'm not surprised. Now, I was also a bit disappointed that the Minister couldn't give us any clarity today on the 10% for T-levels. People in the sector who are delivering these great qualifications, and the government agrees that they're great qualifications, are crying out for clarity on this. They are making decisions right now. The government keeps talking about how it wants to move fast. We're very dynamic, we're very ambitious. And yet, on the things where the sector do want them to move fast, they are not moving at perhaps the pace that people who are at the front line would like, which is a great shame. And likewise, once again, we see with the funding decisions on national insurance stuff, technical education once again being a bit second class. Schools get funding decision at least slightly before the start of the financial year in which the national insurance increase will hit them, whereas those in technical education will have to wait a long way into the academic year when they've already been paying out significant sums in increased national insurance to find out if there will be compensation and how much of it will be covered, and as schools are discovering, often that's a bitter experience because they find that they've been shortchanged by the Treasury. But we will not move these new clauses to a vote today. I think we have had a good debate during these sessions. We have set out our concerns, which are pretty serious concerns about this. I hope that even if they don't change their votes today, we will at least have given ministers cause to think about how Skills England will operate. And I hope that they will, if they don't listen to us, at least listen to some of the criticisms which we have been reading out during these debates from all kinds of stakeholders, both in industry and in education, about the decisions they're about to make. And I hope that they will act on those concerns.
Is everyone content for the new clause to be withdrawn?
Aye.
New clause by leave withdrawn. Skip that. Right, the final question I must put is that I do report the bill as amended to the House. No one wants to speak. The question is that I do report the bill as amended to the House. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary? The ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. The committee has concluded its work. Order.
Thank you. Thank you for your chairmanship.
Thank you.